If you want to have a better view on how the Bible looks at women in its proper context, then you should get these two books. Matriarchs of the Covenant, written by Abdil Ben Levi, popularly known as Zion Lex. This is a masterpiece.
All right. It's your brother Zion Lex. Sign up for our online academy, which is Learn Torah Hebrew Academy at patreon.com/Learn Torah. There are several classes that we offer. We offer a Biblical Hebrew 101 class for beginners. We have a Biblical Hebrew 102 class for people who are a little bit more advanced. We also have a weekly Torah class. We also have our Patriarchs of the Covenant course, our Matriarchs of the Covenant course, and a bi-weekly rabbinical course. All of these courses can be found on Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Learn Torah. You guys were definitely in for it. It's a very invasive class. All of our classes are deeply invasive and very, very meticulous to the T when it comes to understanding the culture, the heritage, and the history of our ancient ancestors. So sign up for Biblical Hebrew at patreon.com/Learn Torah. I am your brother, Zion Lex.
All right. Shalom, everyone. I hope everybody's having a great, super dope afternoon. I think we just started. What is it? 1:05 p.m. here in New York City. How are you doing, Princess Hadassah?
Shalom, Moray Nasi. I'm doing well. Excited.
That's excellent. That's excellent. We are definitely going to be in, everybody, for a very, very powerful discussion / lecture given by yours truly, Princess Hadassah, also known as Mora Hadassah of Learn Torah Hebrew Academy. I also want everybody to keep in mind throughout the course of this dialogue that she's also an author. All right. And she'll be sharing links throughout the live stream to her works. She's also holistic and offers a whole slew of holistic herbs. You can go to Hadara Holistic Organics, and I'm sure she'll be sharing the website details with everybody, where everybody can patron her. You guys will be seeing that shortly. And of course, do remember that we have Biblical Hebrew 102, our intermediate / advanced class, happening tonight at 7 p.m. On that note, what brings us here today, Princess? What we talking about today, huh? I get to come up here and misbehave, or we doing a scholarly thing? What we doing today?
You could do what you gonna do. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna get a little bit in my bag of dealing with some of the esoteric and occult, controversial a bit. But when we dive into the mysteries of how it is, in fact, created in synergy with and originating in Torah, we will understand that these mysteries were ours to begin with, that have been usurped by the enemy and distorted for diabolical means. But of course, we know our God, our power, is the only power in the universe, and nothing comes but through him. So any power that is used to exact any kind of result or influence comes from him. And so these mysteries originate in our God and even in Torah. And we will see how they are connected, how they're related, and how they've been distorted, and how we can reclaim their proper application for mastery in our lives.
All right, I appreciate that. Now, what's our inclination within the text of the Torah that we can see some of these systems playing out? Is there any passage or scripture that you can think about that kind of would take us in that journey, apart from what you're about to present for us?
I do have some scriptural references. I didn't plan that at the outset. I have kind of an outline.
Okay. I definitely don't want to disrupt the flow. I want to make sure your flow is perfect, but I definitely just want to make sure that the audience understands. This is more so for the audience. I want the audience to understand that much of what is going to be presented today is obviously sourced in the Torah, right? And I titled today's live stream Alchemy and Divination in the Ancient World, where it opposes and meets Torah, right? And much of her lecture is going to be speaking towards both extremes. And so on that note, It's all on you.
All right. Shalom, everyone. Shalom, mishpacha. Everyone watching, I do appreciate your time and engagement. And there's so much to unpack and simultaneously pack in to the time that we have. So I'm just going to go with the flow as Yah leads. So what we must understand is these days we often shy away from studying the occult and esoterics due to the fear of being complicit in witchcraft. We understand that, as scripture says in 1 Samuel, rebellion is the spirit of witchcraft. We know that witchcraft is manipulation of circumstance by any means. Witchcraft can be very elaborately ceremonial or ritual through what we commonly perceive of as candles and circles and sigils, even the stereotypical voodoo dolls or hoodoo root work and divination and things of that nature. However, witchcraft in spirit is the need to change or exact change or manipulate in order to create the desired outcome, which when we often follow what we think are the desires of our heart, we know scripture says the heart is deceitful above all things. So oftentimes we think we are pursuing desires that we think righteous. However, they could be to our detriment. They could also be to the aggrandizement of our egos. So we must be careful to always allow the Most High to put the desires in our heart. When we seek him, as scripture says, he gives us the righteous desires of our heart. He gives us, and that in itself deserves some clarification. A lot of people think, oh, when you seek the Most High, when you seek to love him and please him, he gives you what you desire. But in fact, he is giving you the desires of your heart. He is rewriting even the cravings of your heart so that you would desire righteousness. You would change your desires to those which are aligned with his righteousness and his will. When we have unrighteous desires or wants, that comes from a place of covetousness, which we know that basically all of the so-called 10 commandments that we are aware of, when you really break them down, they come down to idolatry and covetousness, all of them. They also come down to, as we know, the whole of Torah is fulfilled in the law to love our God with all our heart, mind, and soul, to love our neighbor as ourselves. We know that these are one and the same, and that all the commandments fulfill this law. So our law truly is the law of love. And we're going to come back to that later, especially when we talk about the Crowleyan, Aleister Crowley's influence on what we think of as modern witchcraft and Hermeticism and Satanism, because he says that his law, the satanic law, is love as well. But we know that that's a false imitation, and their application of it is quite different, obviously, from what our God intends for us. So we know that covetousness is the seed that from which grows the fruit of rebellion. When we covet something that we don't necessarily need, when we think that we want for something. And those who are familiar with my coaching and my courses, I always emphasize the distinction between wants and needs. To want something is to be devoid of something, to lack something. And that's why the scripture says, Elohim is my shepherd, I shall not want. I shall want for nothing, I shall lack nothing. And we think that want is equal with desire. To want something, again, is to lack something. So when we operate from a sense of lack, therein comes the spirit of covetousness. When we accept that the Most High's abundance is all around us, it is within us, it is us. When we understand that he is Yireh, He is the sufficient one. He is the provider. Because he is sufficient, we are sufficient. Because he is enough, we are enough. And so what the enemy does is capitalize off of these seeds of doubt and insecurity and these seeds in which we think we're lacking something. We're not good enough. We need something more. We need to know more. And thus the seduction, some may say, of Hawa in the garden, the planting of the seed of doubt to say, you know, did God really say that? Don't you want more? Don't you want to know more? And the search for knowledge and power, especially through paths of the occult, is the return to that. And it's no wonder that in basically all occult traditions, they glorify the serpent, the iconography and the image of the serpent. And many of us are now familiar with more of the mainstreamed aspects of yoga and Kundalini yoga. And we hear these terms as a collective, but many are not really aware of what they are. And the Kundalini serpent, all of these synchronicities are indicative of, again, the great deception of the serpent to plant the seeds that cause us to crave to know more, thinking that it will make us greater when we are already great in the Most High. And so I did just say a lot. I'll pause right there before I continue. If there's any other commentary, I don't see any questions from the chat, but if you know of some.
Yeah, no questions raised from the chat so far. So, why do you think it is that when a religious and spiritual person, let's say, that reads the Bible, why do you think it is that the moment they hear alchemy and the moment they hear divination, that's a red flag and that's that stuff that we don't do? Why do you think that is? Do you think it's a lack of understanding, which breeds ignorance? Do you think it's a lot of teachers out here that is just teaching against without trying to understand? What do you think is the genesis of a person's ignorance when they hear these terms and automatically assume everything about it is utterly wicked?
That's a wonderful question. I think, again, it boils down to the fear of transgressing or crossing that line into what is strictly forbidden us in Torah. We are commanded to refrain from even the appearance of joining the things of the Most High with the things of the occult, sharing his glory with other deities, and even practicing arts that may exalt other deities or spirits or perceived truths over his ultimate truth. So in a sense, it can be a good thing. It's always better to be safe than sorry, as they say. And we know that there is merit and virtue to, as they say, building a hedge around the law. So these extra protective measures, these extra boundaries that we set to say, hey, I don't even want to dibble and dabble a little bit lest I be led astray. I don't, it's not for everyone to study, and it never has been. Hence why even in, society, we hear about these secret mystery initiations and traditions. It never was meant to be for the so-called laymen, the common people, some of these deeper mysteries. However, the elect, the priesthood, should be privy to some of these things. Not only what I find more important, to know the strategies of the enemy, it's important to know the beliefs and practices of those who oppose us, who oppose our God, who oppose our culture and our truth. And that's where I think some make the mistake of being too wary to even study, to say, okay, I'm not even going to take the time to study. I'm not going to take the time to learn. Why wouldn't you learn the strategies of your enemy in order to know how to counter them? And even to know how to convert them. So studying different religions, of course, if you're strongly fortified with a strong foundation in Torah and in your faith in and of yourself, you shouldn't be afraid to study other traditions so that you can have conversations with others. That's one benefit. You can have conversations from an educated and well-informed place to say, yes, I understand that you believe X, Y, and Z. Well, that's all well and good, but let me bless you with some deeper knowledge. Let me gift you with an even deeper understanding of perhaps even what you think you believe. And I know in my path, I have often met people who practice other religions, and I may, quite frankly, know more than them about their own tradition. And I'm like, oh, you think you know that? But actually, it originated here, and you were sold a lie even in your own tradition. And we know in many of these occult societies or cabals, we know that they very intentionally hide truth from lower levels. Of course, we may have all heard by now, famously in the Freemasonic tradition, the degrees 30 and under are quite blatantly and egregiously deceived as to the mysteries that to which are privy those of the 30th degree and above, particularly and most importantly, who they truly serve. And so to think about investing so much, not only financially, but literally investing so much of your soul into joining a society or an organization, a fraternity or a brotherhood, um, thinking that it is built on certain principles of virtue and honor, only to find out after you've been ensnared and trapped that you're really serving an entirely different purpose. And unfortunately, so many get caught up. Even there's so much conversation about the industry and selling your soul and the so-called Illuminati rituals and sacrifices. And of course, a lot of it has been sensationalized, but there is truth to that. A lot of these people sign these contracts, they don't even understand. And not only the physical, literal printed contract in these industries and even in politics, but understanding the spiritual contract, the spiritual covenants that are being enacted, and the long-term effects, the generational effects. So a lot of people don't understand when they get enmeshed in these traditions that they are being very blatantly deceived by the higher levels of the priesthood, the higher ups in the hierarchical order, and they're being hoodwinked, literally, and bamboozled, as our brother Malcolm said. So, to come back to what I was saying, even for us, it is incumbent upon us to be learned in the traditions of the other nations, in the hopes that at best we could even help educate them and save their souls. Would be a beautiful result of that study, to disillusion them and demystify them to maybe some of the deceptions that they are told about what they're taught to believe. Also, to go back to your question again, that fear causes us to put these hedges around this information and causes us to block ourselves, even with good intention, from learning this information, because quite frankly, many may not be strong enough to handle the knowledge. Many may be led astray, again, if they don't have that strong foundation in Torah for themselves and that strong relationship with the Most High, most importantly, where they're able to hear Him clearly. As we know famously, my sheep will know my voice. And the example that I always use is with my children. One day I was going over that scripture with my children, and my daughter told me, Mom, it's like, we know your voice. If someone came to us and said, hey, come with us, your mom said, it's time to take you to an appointment to get your vaccine, they would know that I didn't say that. They would know I didn't authorize that. That doesn't sound like me. So not only the physical quality of my voice as their mother, but understanding me, my soul, my foundation of beliefs, my moral compass and ethics, the foundation of the values I've instilled in them. They're able to discern if something is against that. So you have to be able to hear from the Most High in an intimate way as the Father, as a child knows their father's voice, as a child is well acquainted with their father's principles. They know what their father will allow and not allow. They know what their, the virtues of which their father's foundation is comprised. So it comes down to knowing his voice. And unfortunately, many don't. And they are led astray into other scriptures. Even myself, having studied different scriptures, even the Gnostic scriptures, I'm very well versed, even from a literary standpoint, of voice. In literature, we speak of the voice, the narrator's voice, the author's voice, the distinction between one writer and another. So when you're familiar with that, you can learn how to distinguish even pseudo gospels, false gospels, Gnostic gospels. Some things may sound well and good, but just as you did in that brilliant debate on the Awaspe Bible, one is easily able to point out plagiarism when you understand the true voice. So
That's right.
yeah.
That's right. On that note, I wanted to ask you also. I did a lecture on Titans TV a number of years ago, entitled "The Alchemy of Torah." I even have that PowerPoint ready in case at the end of your presentation I may pull up a slide or two from it. When you say alchemy and when you say divination, can you give us, from your knowledge base, a clear and concise definition of alchemy versus divination?
Well, now we might have to get into my slideshow, but just right
No,
now,
okay, okay. If
well,
it's in your slideshow, that's perfect.
we can
That's
start.
perfect.
I can just say from here, alchemy is essentially the art or the science, the chemistry of turning dross matter into that which is valuable, such as gold and precious metals. So the idea of turning, and this is very metaphorical, allegorical, this is on several different levels, not only the physical and chemical, but also the spiritual, even emotional. So the idea of transforming and transfiguring something from that which is base,
That's right.
base metals
That's
or dross materials, that which is corrupt, that which is impure, that which is adulterated, into that which is pure, that which is the essential quintessence.
mm,
And it makes me think, of course, of Shakespeare's Hamlet, to be or not to be. And what's so interesting, of course, we often hear that and draw from that in popular culture. But even that passage, that soliloquy that he delivered, is speaking of that alchemical purification of man, the soul of man,
mm,
the being of man. And so when he says, what is this quintessence of dust? We're speaking about man made from dust, made from earth, made from clay, being transformed into the most perfect example of the
mm,
Most High's divinity, even through his material and physical form. And so, what I love to think about in applying alchemy in an allegorical and metaphorical sense, even in my own life, is this process, this journey through transfiguring the soul, as I said, from, transfiguring the mind, as we talked about. Torah converts the mind, it perfects the soul. So when we think about going from this animalistic base nature of our human cells, our material physical cells, and elevating to the most divine, the most pure part of ourselves, which is the soul. And even in the daily prayers from the Siddur, we say, yeah, the soul that you placed in me was pure. And
mhm,
this is in stark contrast to, I would say, even some Catholic or Christian doctrines that give us the impression that we are inherently evil or impure. But in fact, our soul is innately pure. And our journey is this constant teshuvah, to return to that. So, what I also would like to touch on throughout this presentation is, Torah being likened to the womb in which we are born and shaped, our first home as the womb and as mother. And also this place of alchemy. So when we return to ourselves, when we return to our God, when we return to our culture, when we return to our identity, all of this being teshuva, this return is a return home. And it is a return to this immersion in these alchemical waters. And we'll see that alchemy is this beautiful interplay of elements, most notably fire and water, heat and cooling aspects to transform matter into different phases. Now, going into divination, divination is, a spectrum, a variety of forms in which we seek knowledge or the awareness of events to come, or even clarification on what has already happened or is happening through spiritual means, through access to and channeling of messages from spirit. There are a plethora of methods to do so. Many commonly think of tarot readings, card readings, even the throwing of cowrie shells, marine dilogun in the Yoruba Orisha traditions, throwing bones. A lot of people don't even know the common playing cards were the original tarot cards, were originally used for divination.
That's right.
Even dominoes. In some regions, we still use the term throwing bones when we talk about dominoes. Dominoes wasn't a game initially. Even the numerical values of the pieces goes into numerology, and numerology itself can be used to extract knowledge as a form of divination. And the literal throwing of bones. We know that in a lot of Southern American hoodoo root work, they throw cat bones or chicken bones to divine. It can be done through geomancy, the throwing of stones, the manipulation of stones, through scrying, the reading of water. And some may say that when Yosef or Joseph refers to his cup of divination, that was the implement with which he was able to practice scrying or water divination. And oftentimes, going back to alchemy and the use of precious metals, oftentimes even the material with, in which the water was placed, whether it's a golden vessel, a silver vessel. We know that Yosef's cup was silver, for example. We know that also lends a certain property and a certain perfection, some may say, or clarity of the messages received. So divination can be performed in many ways. Some, may use signs in nature, a feather from a crow falling, and use that as a form of divination. So ultimately, again, divination is just the inquiries placed to the divine. And we know that there are prophets and vessels and seers on both sides, those who consult our God and those who consult other quote unquote gods or deities or spirits or entities. You just have to know the source. We are all channels. We are all meant to channel energy. And we know that everything is energy. And knowledge and wisdom, the impartation of information and even vision comes from a source of energy. We just have to be careful what source it is.
Excellent point. Excellent point. When I think of alchemy and maybe even the alchemy of the Torah, it leads me to verses such as gold is tried in the furnace, so are men tried in the furnace of adversity. I used to work as a person that refined gold. I worked for a mobile refinery where we melted gold on an armored truck. They're called yikes, yikes. The name will come to me. They're based out of Chesapeake, Virginia. The owner's name is Craig Noyes. Assay on Wheels. So I worked for a company in Virginia back in 2011, 11/2012 that is called Assay on Wheels. And we melted gold on an armored truck. We drive to the Diamond District here in New York City and go to several stores, collect their gold, and melt it and give them the current dollar value based on what Kitco was showing, which is a universal gold refinery exchange. Um, so, on that note, when we think of how we test and how we try gold, we know gold has to be passed through the fire. What happens now when you pass gold through the fire? Anything that is not gold, it either melts to the top or it falls to the bottom of the melt, right? But the reality is what you pull out of the melt would be pure gold, and the remaining is the dross. The Creator expects that as we journey through life and we keep His commandments, that's a form of spiritual alchemy, right? Because we're being tried and tested in the furnace of adversity, life. And if we're following the decrees and we're following the commands of the Almighty, then we come out another person. We come out whole. We come out pure, right? Another reason why gold is passed through the fire is to check its purity, right? So there is a level of spiritual alchemy that we can speak towards when we're speaking Torah. So I don't want anyone to be lost on these terms because you may be foreign to it. Understand that the concept is all throughout Torah, all throughout Torah. On that note, I am ready when you're ready to share your presentation.
Told I'm all right. And I have, I'm so glad that you said that and mentioned that. Like I have so many notes. I can't even see them really. I have to wear glasses. I be getting by with my little contact. But I literally have that on my notes, the refiner's fire. Often we speak of the spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, or even the word of the Most High is likened to the refiner's fire, in which we are, as you said, refined and purified like gold. And even myself, just over time, it has become part of my personal daily prayers, to say, continue to examine me, to try me like gold. And that refinement, as you know from personal experience, comes from those fiery trials and tribulations, also akin to the separation of the chaff from the wheat or the wheat from the tares in the parables of Yeshua, Mashiach. So this idea of separating that which is corrupt, this idea of separating that which is defiled and profane and ultimately unfruitful is the work of the great alchemist, of course, the Creator himself, the Most High. So we know that the corrupt and corrupting in us and of us is burned away to leave behind what is pure and even what many don't realize when they think of gold is very soft. The purer it is, the softer it is. And the higher the carat, the softer it is, and the more malleable. And so we have to think about the malleability that the Most High requires of us. The ability for Him to mold us as the clay of the potter. That's what He requires and desires of us. The willingness, the surrender to Him to be in control, to shape us as He wills, as is aligned with His will and word, and to conform to His spirit. And anyway, I was about to go somewhere else. I'll try to think it. But, again, alchemy also goes into, again, the transfiguration from the seen or the solid, the material, to also the unseen, the fluid. And I'll go again into the alchemy of masculine and feminine, these elements, where masculine is likened to the solidness, the security, the stability, the consistency of earth, even the hardness of stone, which you could take in many different ways. And even the fluidity of woman, the softness of woman, the permeability of woman, the ability to be penetrated. And when we think of ourselves as the bride of the Most High, or even the bride of Mashiach, whichever way you choose to look at it, Israel as the bride of Yah, or, the so-called church or assembly, you've already delineated that beautifully in the debate, even with Vocab Malone the other day. We know who the true so-called church is. But anyway, knowing that we are the bride, we know that just as a man occupies and fills and penetrates his wife, we know that we are penetrated by his knowledge, by his consciousness, by his spirit, by his ruach, and filled with him as, again, the vessels, going back again to the vessels, that channel. And then more particularly, as a woman, of course, I'm going to lean to the understanding of the womb as this chalice, even the Holy Grail, which we'll get into later, and how, again, we are filled in these spaces. So we can go to the slideshow. I have so many notes right here, but the slideshow will help everyone to follow along.
Okay, excellent. Just give me a second. There we go. Okay.
Okay. So I've titled this Duality at the Door, Alchemy at the Altar, Torah, Marriage, and the Waters of the Womb. You may go to the next slide. So here we have a brief review of alchemy. Because I'm not sure what people can read on their screen, I'm hoping people are able to read along the screen, because I don't want to take up too much time with what they can already.
Yeah, they actually can. I have it blowed up on 2 iPads on the side, and I even have it on my phone. And if you make the screen larger, you can see everything. So everybody should have no problem reading through this.
Okay. So basically, this summary on the side, which you all should be able to read along for yourselves, kind of just reiterates what you and I have both already presenced in this conversation: the process of alchemy, the transformation, even the purification by fire. Also, what I would like to note is this purification by fire is also significant when we think of the idea of hell, when we think of the literal translation of hell as Gehenna or Gehinom. And what many may not be aware of is we're literally essentially talking about a trash heap, an incinerated, a place where trash and that which is defiled and corrupted is incinerated. And we think of, again, the process of burning away that which is impure, melting down to the purest essence. And so what I'd like to note, which may or may not be controversial, is that there are many different beliefs about what hell is, where it is, what type of state it is, and also whether it is eternal or not. For some, hell may not necessarily be an eternal sentence in the afterlife. Some may also understand that through different stages of our life, we live hell on earth. And even that will maybe get to touch on later if we have time, when I go into the Torah and specifically the tarot, and specifically the tower experience that we all experience in our lives, the kind of ego deaths that we experience in our lives, these rock bottom experiences where we lose everything and we, again, are tried by fire through tribulation. And so hell may be a state of mind. It may be a temporary, transient experience even on earth, that if we are mindful and continuing to press toward the mark, and hoping in the end result of that purification of us through these trials, we'll understand that it's not eternal. It's not a state that we are meant to stay in. And the Most High, in his great mercy, as he seeks that none should perish, he doesn't seek any of us to be eternally condemned to separation from him, which is also its own hell. These trials through which we are burned are actually him purifying us, so we can kind of see hell itself as this temporary transient stage, even of alchemy, through which we are purified. And maybe for some, hell is an experience, whether in this life or the next, where we are merely put in the fire to burn away that which is corrupt. And I guess depending on how corrupt you are, may be the contingency on how long you are in that state in this life or the next. So here you also see this kind of stairway delineating different phases of alchemy. I won't spend too much time going into that, but two stages that I would like to speak about that will be relevant later, especially in the alchemy of masculine and feminine, is sublimation and distillation. So when we think of something that's sublime, oftentimes in more poetic literary terms, we think of something that is pure, that is exalted, that is supremely beautiful, even awe-inspiring. Something that is sublime is indeed something that has been purified. The process of sublimation through alchemy is the changing of a solid to vapor with heat, and then subsequently cooled again to coagulate, in a sense, to a solid. And so we think also of sublimation as this process where one is spiritually or morally purified and brought to a higher degree of that moral or spiritual purity. And when we think of distillation, a lot of us think maybe of distilled water. We know that that is a process of purifying a liquid, extracting its purest essence by heating or cooling. And again, we see this constant interplay between liquid and solid, heat and coolness, fire and water, again, masculine and feminine. Truly, the only alchemy really is masculine and feminine. The universe is made up of contrasts, all of which essentially are masculine and feminine. And this interplay between masculine and feminine, even metaphorically as a kind of sexual union, is that which creates purity, just as the union of masculine and feminine, even in the physical bodily sense, obviously creates life and the purest essence of life, because what more is a child but the purest potential of what man can be? And thus even Yeshua delights in children, and he says that even to come to understand him, we should be childlike, and that childlike state is the purest quintessence of dust, as Hamlet said, this purest aspect of humanity. You can go to the next slide. Just some pictures here to kind of reinforce this interplay of opposites, the sun and the moon. We also know that masculine and feminine is also depicted as the masculine being solar energy and the woman being lunar energy. We know that in a perfect world, every woman would actually be synchronized by her menstrual cycle to the moon, the phases of the moon. We know that women traditionally would begin their menses on the new moon or the dark moon and go through this cycle, this fertility cycle, which also reflects the cycles of the seasons of nature, which is in a few more slides down. But for now, we'll just, again, focus on the contrasts, and you can go to the next slide. Okay, duality. I wanted to speak briefly on the concept of duality, which is often spoken of in esoteric circles. For those who are familiar with a lot of the rhetoric surrounding the so-called Illuminati and a lot of these conspiracy theories, they'll talk about, oh, you saw the checkerboard floor and the black and white. There's a lot of symbolism, which again, there's always truth there. There's a lot of symbolism even with the contrast of colors, particularly black and white. We know that also is indicative of the binary system. of which the universe is comprised, even the mathematics of the binary code. Because I know we're pressed for time, we can't go into all of those intricate sciences. However, duality and the transcendence of duality is a principle used often in satanic circles or otherwise hermetic ritual circles. And this idea that we are meant to be both in one. And this is where these deviations from truth come in many seductive forms. And so they glorify this idea of self as God, because the idea that they'll propose is because God created everything, he should also be completely evil, quote unquote, and completely good at the same time. And thus, so shall we. So many don't realize that Satanism, the tenets of Satanism, are not necessarily the worship of this deity, this entity known as Satan. Although they do have figures and icons and idols and, I don't know, encapsulations of this kind of egregore of consciousness. But in reality, they worship the self, and the idea that the self is God, the idea that we should do whatever we desire, do as thou wilt, because we, in whatever we do, whether evil or good, is the power of God himself. And so they use this in the euphemism of transcending duality. And the idea, this is also where this non-binary doctrine came from that is permeating society now. And I may have time to go into even later why their God or their Satan or even their Baphomet is depicted as an androgynous deity, a non-binary deity, and why many pagan goddesses in particular had androgynous priesthoods or priesthoods even of eunuchs. But that's a whole nother story. So just for time, we can go to the next slide. You'll also see the alchemical symbols here on this slide. And be very mindful, particularly of these triangular symbols, the upward facing triangle being representative of masculinity, and the downward facing triangle being representative of femininity. And by no far stretch of the imagination, every adult should also be able to realize that, of course, anatomically, we know masculine and feminine looks kind of like these symbols as well. You can go to the next slide, please. This is an alchemical table of elements. We'll also notice that there are many so-called zodiac or astrological symbols here. I was going to spend some time here, but I think it would be more fruitful to go ahead and we can revisit some of this another time. All right. So here we see these altars. We also see the Kabbalah tree of life and the tarot. There is a very intricate relationship between the Kabbalah and the tarot, which I hope I have enough time to get into later. We also see one of the Masonic lodges and their altar set up, as well as these two pillars, which will be important to revisit later, specifically in the tarot card of the High Priestess. But for now, we'll focus on what we see on this altar as you advance to the next slide. So this is a basic altar setup that I just picked from the internet, most likely from a Wiccan source. Wicca has an interesting history. It's really just Satanism with a little fluff. I mean, and it literally is. One of the fathers of Wiccanism, the so-called fathers of Wiccanism, Lawrence Gardner, was a so-called disciple of Aleister Crowley, and just decided to make his own system that he thought was distinct from Satanism. But again, it's just a little fluff. So the basic altar setup is very intentional. And you must contain all of the elements in order to bring the effectiveness and efficiency of one's magic. So, earth, air, fire, and water must always be represented as, most importantly, you see masculine and feminine. The god and the goddess have to be present at the altar and served at the altar. We know that on an altar, you see different representations of masculine and feminine. A bowl or a cup or a chalice, for instance, obviously represents feminine and they contain water. We know that the athame or the ritual dagger, the sword, and the wand represent obviously phallic masculinity. We have incense present for the air element, which also denotes intuition and intellect, just as the ruach represents not only the spirit, but it also represents breath. It also represents thought and intellect as an airy element. And usually you have a bowl of salt or earth, physical earth or dirt from the ground to represent the earth element and the groundedness of this world. A bell is often featured or some sort of musical instrument. We know that music, that can be a whole lesson in and of itself, the power of music, the power of sound in general, the vibrations and frequencies of sound that invoke spirit and the rhythms that are associated with each spirit. But, again, that would be a whole nother lesson for another day. You can advance to the next slide, please. As I said, combining the elements, a precarious balance is needed to invoke spirit, open portals, and enact covenants. So just as in cooking, we must have the delicate balance of the right elements. Even in Chinese philosophy, we have the five spices, the five tastes, and each of these must be balanced to create that distinct deliciousness, that distinct experience of savoring a good meal. And any successful endeavor must have the right balance of elements. And thus, an altar is most effective when all of these elements or ingredients, so to speak, are present. And for time, anybody who's interested in reading that more closely can go back to the replay and pause the video as we advance to the next slide.
Just before we go to the next slide, could I ask you just for a couple of moments, not too much time, but just for a couple of moments, only because it's in the column where you have the explanation. Talk to us a little bit about spirit cooking. There's a craze created in the media, due to Jay-Z's affiliation. I forget her name. Don't crucify me, everybody. But I'm sure if you guys Google, you could see he's associated with this woman who is deemed to be very powerful in the world of Hollywood and entertainment, and she's said to be involved with something called spirit cooking. Can you tell us what that is and maybe even what that entails?
Yes, that is actually part of the presentation. I'm not sure how many slides past this,
Oh,
but I
okay.
do have some slides with Marina Abramovic, the infamous
There we
spirit.
go. That's her name. All
Yeah.
right.
So we will get to her. We're going to get to her. I just want to show again
Oh,
in this slide in particular, we again have the prototypical altar. We have the combination of elements, earth, air, fire, water. We have the daggers, we have the chalices, we have feminine and masculine represented very pointedly, of course, in these idol statues here.
wait.
And
I'm sorry. I have to ask you this on a very serious note. Where did you find Vocab's Malone old high school pictures? What we're looking at now. Where'd you find this?
oh
This is
my
Vocab.
goodness, you better stop. You better stop.
Do continue. I told you I'm here for it. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Anyway, I'm not even gonna play into that. Ain't nobody gonna be coming for me. um, so we have here the goat god, or the horned god. Some may even say the horny god. We definitely see a very obvious presence of the erect phallus here. Um, I think, if my eyes do not deceive me, someone left in the chat a comment about Papa Legba.
Yes.
You know that
Yes.
Legba from the Haitian Vodou tradition, also very much revered in the New Orleans voodoo tradition and in many hoodoo divisions. But Papa Legba is also syncretized. Ultimately, the origins are in the Yoruba deity Eshu. Some may even say Dahomian, because many don't realize, just a quick thing, like when we think of the maps of so-called Africa, when we think of the division of countries, um, it's kind of like a grid. We see a lot of country lines vertically, so to speak, but the tribal affiliations may be more so horizontal. So you may have the same tribal lineage going horizontally, in a sense, through several countries: Dahomey, Benin, Togo, Nigeria, Ghana. Um, However, again, due to the division of Africa by various European countries, each country may be divided through these vertical lines. But nonetheless, the Yoruba have a very close relationship with the kingdom of Benin, the Dahomean kingdom. And Dahomean Vodun is the original form of what is now understood and practiced as Haitian Vodun, and again, New Orleans Voodoo. And we understand that there's a direct line of descendants from Dahomey, the Dahomean slaves from what is now Benin and Togo to Haiti. And then after the revolution, Haitians being brought to New Orleans, and the very unique climate. We don't have the time to get into that, but the very unique social climate is very interesting. I suggest we all kind of study Louisiana and New Orleans in particular. The very unique culture created from the relationships between the so-called whites and blacks, even down to the hierarchy of the gens de couleur, the black, the colored people, even with the quadroons and the octoroons and the different levels of prestige and privilege afforded to different mulattoes, in a sense, or if you were more mixed or you had more white blood and all of that. But so, we see a direct lineage from Dahomean voodoo to Haitian voodoo to New Orleans voodoo. But also, many don't understand that the Yoruba Orisha tradition borrows very much from Dahomean voodoo, and a lot of their deities are borrowed and interchangeable. So many of the Orisha are actually have their origins from Dahomey, and that's a whole history of that. But Eshu is the Yoruba deity he's most commonly associated with the crossroads, with gateways and doors. Often, if you go to a practitioner's home, you'll see a small figure of usually a head or even a coconut behind the door surreptitiously. You may overlook it, but that's definitely him, and that's indicative that they practice either Orisha, our religion, or Palo Mayombe, or one of the derivatives of Voodoo. Also, more traditionally, a shoe is represented by an erect phallus. There are many temples in continental Africa, in Nigeria, where he doesn't have the form of a man at all. He doesn't have, a lot of times he can be depicted as a statue of a man or, again, a head. But there are many temples where he is worshipped as an actual phallus. And this also has interesting connections in the Hindu tradition with the Shiva lingam. The lingam itself is the Sanskrit word for the male regenerative organ, just as yoni, of which we may be more familiar as a collective. Yoni refers to the female regenerative organs. Yoni is the sacred space, and the lingam, in contrast, is the phallic organ, and it is the generative principle, again, associated with fire, associated with the direction of energy. And oh my gosh, there's so much. I'm just trying to fit everything into this window of time. Oh gosh, but Papa Legba, Eshu, these phallic associations and connections. We also see, even in this picture on the screen now, we see the horned god, the horny god. We see the erect penis as the original wand. And even later in the slideshow, you'll see the original tarot card for the magician has him holding a circumcised penis as the original wand. And that is very important later as we discuss the Jewish origins of the tarot, which many are unfamiliar with, but are very
That's right.
clear.
Right.
So the
That's right.
next,
And I want to emphasize just for a moment, because I know when you're saying Jewish, you're being politically correct. But for the Israelite community, we really mean the Israelite origins.
yes. Yes. So a lot are not familiar that the tarot does have many. Oh, here it is. I slipped it in there. Okay. So I did put it next. It was later in the slideshow. I moved it. So here is the original magician card from the Marseille tarot deck, which is the original tarot deck. And the original picture, what is in his hand is a penis. And they went through great pains to actually depict it as circumcised. So, just real quick, I will explain before we get into the fullness of Torah moving forward. Tarot is that we have to understand the concept of cryptic Judaism and the clandestine ways in which we as a people, the Israelite community, being scattered among many nations, have had to practice our faith clandestinely. And when we think even of incognito, I think of a cousin of mine who used to always say incognito. We got to be incognito. So there is a whole history of us having to disguise our faith just to survive. And the tarot is a great example of that. So in many countries where we were persecuted, we had to syncretize with other religions, and syncretism in general is this whole realm that I would love to get into. But most often, while we're talking about the occult and traditions like voodoo and Ifa and how they've evolved in the so-called New World, syncretism is how many traditions were kept alive, including ours. So the idea of, especially in the Caribbean and in South America, or Latin America, where a lot of the African traditions were practiced under the guise of Catholicism. So you have many different African gods or deities disguised as the Catholic saints. That's the most common association with syncretism that we may think of. But again, all around the world, we see syncretism where Oshun is equated with Lakshmi, is equated with Freya, Venus and Aphrodite, Ishtar and Inanna, Ashtoreth, coming back to these deities that are actually mentioned in scripture and in biblical times. So essentially, there are so many deities with different names that are the same essence. That's also another form of syncretism. But going back to cryptic Judaism and this clandestine practice of Torah from which the tarot originates, we have these images that originally were very pointedly depicting principles from Torah, even some of our stories. And even right now, as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about the quilts. I don't know why. My mind, that's just how my mind be working. But in slavery, we know that many of our ancestors would create these quilts, and on these quilts would be these elaborate designs that actually would be maps to freedom, when we would be plotting our escape to run away to freedom. Also, they would also be stories of families, family stories told through these images, even our history, even biblical stories. So in an interesting way, the tarot cards depict many of the stories from the Bible, or many of the stories that may have been learned through the mysteries of Egypt and distilled into these seemingly simple images that carry so much meaning. And I'm really trying to stay on point here with my notes so I don't digress too far.
Take your time. We enjoying this. Take your time. While you're taking your time doing that, I just want to remind everybody, thumb up the video, share the live stream. We do have a lot of conversations that we're bringing to you this Sunday. I will be joined by one of my big brothers. I even can say one of my mentors in the Israelite community. His name is Chief Naftali Ben Dan. He'll be joining us Sunday at 4 p.m. and he'll be doing a lecture on the Nat Turner Slave Rebellion as part of our Black History Month series. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be Sunday at 4 p.m. right here on Zion Lex TV. We have Chief Naftali Ben Dan doing a lecture on Nat Turner Slave Rebellion. Let me tell y'all something about this man. I need to focus for a moment. Chief Naftali Ben Dan is a person that I grew up around since I was 15 in the Israelite community. When you guys watch my debate with Vocab Malone and you saw me share a newspaper clipping where in my congregation we put out a newspaper called the Third Eye newspaper, and I published several articles. One of them, I published an article on the origin of European Jewry. Well, the man that I'll be bringing to you on Sunday at 4 p.m., Chief Naftali Ben Dan, he was the editor-in-chief for that newspaper, and he was the person that convinced me that I should begin writing for it. Keep in mind, I'm 15 years old, and he has always been a hell of a writer, a hell of a speaker, and his spirit and his passion for nationalism within the culture of Torah. I'm telling y'all something right now. Make sure whatever you're doing on Sunday that you are free, because Chief Naftali Ben Dan will be going all the way in. He is somebody that from my past and present that I really have come to grow and develop a lot of respect for. And I'm plugging this in this way because he's been in this journey his entire life. He's about 47, 48 years old, born into the Israelite way of life and thinking. And he'll be joining us on Sunday to do a lecture on Nat Turner Slave Rebellion. And I'm telling you guys, this is a lecture. You bring mom out, you bring dad out, you bring your wife out, you bring your kids out, uncle, auntie. He brings it powerful, but he brings it respectful. But you definitely want to be here. My apologies, Princess Hadassah. It's on you.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. I definitely am excited for that upcoming lecture on Nat Turner. I myself am very fond of the Nate Parker film Birth of a Nation. And as a child, I was very much, in some way, some may say even enamored with Nat Turner, and read voraciously and prolifically about Nat Turner and his life and his movement. And the Nate Parker film was unfortunately deliberately undermined and he was demonized. It's no accident that around the premiere of the film, of course, the infamous rape allegations came about. Excuse me, grape, RAPE, sorry, YouTube. But the infamous assault allegations came out. And unfortunately, that brilliant film was really swept under the rug. And as you can clearly see in the film, first of all, we have to give him kudos for the brilliant reference to the original Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith, from which the Ku Klux Klan literally was resurged and made bigger. That's a whole nother history in and of itself. But in that film, you very clearly see that Nate Parker, as the director and writer, was very intentional about enforcing and affirming our Hebrew Israelite identity and making very clear to us that our ancestors always knew who we were and whose we were. And myself, like I always talk about as a child, just for some reason, I was so drawn to reading slave narratives and just reading all of these different narratives. It was so clear, even as a child, they knew that we were the biblical people. Even the traditional Negro spirituals, go down Moses and these imagery, the imagery even of the chariot. We know that these were not just songs that they were singing by happenstance. This was affirming our identity and them knowing that we were the children of the biblical Israelites. So needless to say, I'm extremely excited for this presentation on Sunday. So thank you for telling us about that.
No, absolutely. In fact, I decided to share it on the big screen so everybody could see. So again, everybody, that's going to be this Sunday at 4 p.m. Nat Turner's Slave Rebellion, brought to you by Zion Lex TV, and going to be lectured by Chief Naftali Ben Dan. When I tell you the brother has put in a lot of work, he put in a lot of work. He still works with behind the scenes and in front of the scenes and to the side of the scenes with Dr. Leonard Jeffries, as well as Dr. Leonard Jeffries' wife here in New York City. And the brother has a long track record of putting on for our community and putting on for our people. He is a nationalist. So while he is absolutely invested in building the Israelite community, he does not stop there. He builds with all communities of Black people all throughout the world. And that's one of the reasons why I've come to grow love and respect for this particular brother. But on that note, we will absolutely be going right back to your PowerPoint presentation. And there we go.
Yeah. So here we see the original magician card in the tarot, and the magician is holding a circumcised phallus. And the elements on the table, again, we know, as I spoke about in the previous slides, there have to be particular and specific elements present for the magic to be effective. But what the card itself speaks of is will, directed will and consciousness. And the energy directed, we know that, of course, the nature of the wand as a phallic symbol directs energy outward. And we know even the masculine nature, the makeup of man, is very externally driven. I'm trying to, it's so much I just want to say. We know anatomically, obviously, that's very clear to us that the phallus faces outward and becomes erect to direct energy and intention. And we know that there's an intention to explore. Even the constant seeking to even explore women by men is very intentional, to explore the unknown. And this goes into a little bit of what I'll talk more about with Carl Jung, or Carl Jung, however people choose to pronounce his name. But the Jungian system of archetypes and the archetypal journey, the fool's journey, the hero's journey, which is literally the same journey depicted in the tarot, the different phases of life of the human soul, basically going out into the world to explore and then coming back inward to find oneself and ultimately find God within the self. And how every story is pretty much the same story. Every fairy tale, every Disney movie, every movie, everything that we can think of is the fool's journey, is the hero's journey, is the journey of the tarot. And, going back to the magician in particular, we know that here this card depicts the assembly of the tools that we will need, whether tools of character, tools of morality, even the tools with which we are empowered through education. These different elements, ingredients, and tools by which we are empowered to enact and exact our will upon the world around us and explore the world through willfulness and directed intentional energy. And what's interesting is, masculinity is so external. Even the masculine mind is very outward looking. Man looks outside of himself for meaning, whereas women, we are internal. We are internal anatomically, we are internal mentally and emotionally. We are more comfortable in these introspective spaces, these reflective spaces, whereas man seeks logic, he seeks evidence through rationality outside of himself, confirmation outside of himself to confirm what's inside the self. Whereas women, we work in reverse. We receive revelation from within. But that's a whole nother thing. Trying to keep it focused. But I think what's important to mention as we start to depict the tarot is that we live the word. The Torah is living. That's why it's called the living word. We live the word as the path of tarot. So it's not all about divination and psychic readings. It's not even all about consulting spirits or familiar spirits. It is really these stages and phases depicted through these pictures of different phases of life that we all go through, different aspects of the human journey, different aspects of the spiritual journey, again, different aspects of the alchemical process by which we are refined and perfected through Torah. So I go, even in, I did release the first volume of my series of what I'm calling revelatory memoirs last night. So I, began to be more pressed to tell my story, not just for the sake of telling my story in this egoic way, but rather giving glory to the Most High by revealing through my story that we all live lives that reflect Torah. We all live lives that reflect even the patriarchs and matriarchs, even our ancestors whose stories are told in Torah. If we really look into ourselves closely enough and read Torah closely enough, we can see where each one of us lives at one point in our life the story of Joseph, the story of betrayal and persecution. We live, each of us, in a sense, whether male or female, in a certain symbolic or allegorical senses, we can each live the story of a Hadassah, of a Queen Esther, in one whose identity is hidden and then one is glorified and chosen, being set apart for a purpose as a deliverer, all these different things. So we can think of Torah, and there is a very great possibility that one can look even at the trajectory of the stories of Torah, not only prophetically, relating even to Mashiach through different stages. We know he's reflected even in the feasts, all these different things, but even through the different aspects of Torah, tarot, which the early creators of tarot, who were Jewish or Israelite, were actually doing. So hidden in the symbols of these pictures are, again, the stories of Torah, the processes through which the Most High refines us and purifies us, as each aspect of our life represents these archetypes, going back to the Jungian terminology. So just like in the archetypal journey of the tarot, which is called the Fool's Journey, through each of the 22 major arcana, we each live in one way or another each of the stories in the Torah as we live each of the arcana and the phases of alchemy. So I believe you can go to the next slide. We'll see what pops up.
All right. Just give me a second. Sorry. There we go.
Okay. So here we see a Hermetic ceremonial priest performing a form of Enochian magic. Also, please note the name Enochian comes from Enoch. We know that many of these Hermetic or even satanic priests draw from a lot of the mysteries of the book of Enoch, but that's another story we don't have time for right now. This is also associated with goetic chaos magic. And what he's working with here is a sigil. And sigils are symbols or seals, most popular of which are the seals of Solomon. There are books, esoteric occult books, such as the 6th and 7th books of Moses, and they depict these different seals that were said to be used or learned by Moses or Moshe in Egypt and the Egyptian priesthoods as he was growing up in Egypt. And King Solomon, known for having such a mastery of demonology and control of different angels and demons by the keys of their names, these different seals are attributed to him or to them. And many of these satanic ritualists use these sigils, again, to make their magic effective. A lot of this is most popularly attributed to Aleister Crowley, who coined this system and priesthood of Thelema, which draws again from Enochian magic, Egyptian mystery traditions, and Greco-Roman mystery traditions, such as the Dionysian mysteries associated with Dionysus, who, interestingly enough, also has many interesting parallels to Yeshua, as far as supposedly being of a virgin birth, supposedly being killed and reborn, and turning water into wine, and many other, again, interesting and intriguing parallels. We do see this interesting symbol on the right of the picture of him as he is wearing this pseudo-Egyptian regalia. And we can definitely see some similarity to the so-called Seal of David, or the so-called Jewish star, etc. And we know that that in itself is a combination of the alchemical symbols for masculine and feminine, or fire and water. As you go to the next slide, please. Again, Aleister Crowley. So much symbolism packed into this one picture. Obviously, many Egyptian mysteries, the so-called Eye of Ra, or the Eye of Horus, some say. Oh, so much could be said here, but we just don't have the time. Even the cannabis leaf and the phallic symbol. We do see Lilith here depicted on the bottom right of the screen. Lilith, some, are mentioned in some of the Jewish writings, the so-called Jewish writings and traditions, extra biblical or apocryphal sources. Again, sadly, we just don't have time, but Lilith is also syncretized to Inanna or Ishtar or Ashtoreth. We know that the Baals and the Ashtoreths are written by name clearly throughout many scriptures. Sadly, we don't have time. We'll go to the next slide. There's so many slides. Aleister Crowley is famous for coining the phrase, "do what thou wilt," the satanic mandate. And as we see here, your boy Jay-Z is a big fan of Aleister Crowley's work. And the Beatles' John Lennon. Essentially, again, Satanism, Anton LaVey here in the upper right corner, is the father of modern Satanism, which they pretty much are all the same. But he also was a disciple of Crowleyan teachings, but then he decided to create his own literal Church of Satan. And anyway, I'm trying to skip over so much. We obviously see the alchemical symbols for the feminine in Beyonce's stance, and in Erykah Badu holding up what is commonly referred to as the Yoni Mudra, which depicts the womb and is used in yoga and many Hindu practices, but obviously, as well as symbols have multiple meanings, it is also the alchemical symbol for femininity. It is also the alchemical symbol for water. And obviously, we all, as mature adults, know how water is related to the feminine reproductive organ.
Absolutely.
And the waters of the womb. So next slide. Yes. So drawing from Proverbs 6, I just put this as a scriptural reference to understanding the importance of the symbols that are hidden in plain sight. These configurations of the hands and the feet that many of these elite figures, whether in politics or entertainment, use right in our faces every day. And the different hand signs, even in the mafia or the gang world, that literally are the same as hand signs used in Freemasonry and these esoteric orders. Yes, even gangs have occult origins and occult rituals. That's a whole nother world that I would love to go into. In a past life, I was very obsessed with gangs and the mafia, and I did a whole first year thesis paper at Sarah Lawrence College on how the image of American masculinity was shaped so much by particularly gangster cinema and even hip hop culture and how that is reflecting. But anyway, I don't want to digress too far from that. But we all can read Mishli or Proverbs 6 for ourselves and understand the winking of the eyes. He speaketh with his feet. He teaches with his fingers. And so I use that as a reference to how the wicked among us and in elite positions of society show their allegiance and affiliation in plain sight through these symbols. You can advance to the next slide.
Thanks.
Tyler, the Creator, I don't know much about him. I do know he has an interesting relationship with Jaden Smith. It's interesting. Like, so many people just hear these things and don't say anything about it. Like, we should be very concerned about Will and Jada's children and why Jaden Smith, said very publicly that Tyler, the Creator, was having intimate relationships with him when he was underage, and nobody said anything about these things. I remember these things, and they get swept under the rug and they come quite publicly out, and we have footage of these things, but nobody seeks to investigate deeper. But as we can see, he has Aleister Crowley on his shirt, and so all skin folk and kinfolk, as they say. You can go to the next slide. Of course. Now, the thing that always got me, and I've had my love-hate relationship with Jay-Z. I did used to, I could recite the Blueprint album by heart at one point in my life. But it's just so interesting how they used to say that was like the rock diamond, but clearly that has never been the shape of a diamond in nobody's.
Yeah.
But anyway, we could go to the next slide. Of course, we see Prince Harry, royal family, the hidden hand, indicative of different levels of Freemasonic initiation. As we go to the next slide. Again, what's interesting about the hidden hand and this particular degree of Freemasonic initiation, we know that Freemasonry is replete with references and ritual enactments of things that come from the Bible, the stories of the Bible. And let me not get all up on the screen. I know I can't read that right now, but you can read it for yourself. Press pause on the replay. But we know how that is related to Hebrews in the Bible. We know the traditions of Solomon and Hiram Abith.
If you like, I could read either one. Just let me know which one.
Okay, you can read that first slide. I mean, that first picture on the left.
It says the initiation ritual to this degree reenacts the return to Jerusalem of three most excellent Masons who were held captive in Babylon. I won't go through the whole ceremony and symbolism, but at one point the initiate is asked to learn a secret password and a hand sign in order to go through a series of veils. The following image depicts the hand sign required to go through the second veil as documented in Duncan's Masonic Ritual and Monitor.
Indeed. And hopefully we have time to go into the concept of the veil. I'll try to remind myself later on. Again, just more evidence of these signs. And what people should really ask themselves is, normal people don't just generally make their hands this way. Like, why would it be normal by any stretch of the imagination for a man to just randomly put his hand in his coat in this way? But people don't ask these questions. They don't realize we wouldn't normally do these things in such a pointed way. So there has to be meaning behind it. But one thing I'd like to note is symbols are meant to have many different meanings and can be implemented and applied in many different ways and associated with many different things. So yes, some may say that, you're putting up the devil horns, or you just love rock and roll, or you love Texas football teams. So a lot of times we gaslight ourselves individually and collectively by saying, oh, that's not what it is, regardless of what you think it is or what it may be associated with to you. You must understand and be willing to accept that even a hand sign can mean so many different things. And what's important is the intention and meaning of the person who's doing it in that moment and who they're communicating to. So these elites communicate through codes in plain sight. They're communicating with each other. A lot of people don't understand, even in entertainment, in media, that's a private conversation that we just happen to be witnessing. Magazine covers, these photo shoots. Why is there so much money invested in photo shoots, album covers, magazine covers? That's communication to each other. A lot of times they'll wear a certain outfit, a certain color, they'll pose a certain way on a magazine cover, and we think that was just a fire picture, that was fired, that was a nice picture. But it may be saying something to them about which degree to which they've just been initiated to, which humiliation ritual they just endured, what level of compromise, even what price they should pay for them. It gets so intricate and elaborate. But again, we just don't have time. Next slide, please. Yep. Yeah. So clearly you can see.
Prince is out of, I'm sorry, I just gotta say, Prince is out of control in this picture. If nobody don't say it, I gotta say it. This is just out of control, Prince. And I like Prince music. I even like when he gets on his Afrocentric bandwagon and start talking with bass in his voice. But this picture, Prince, is out of control.
Absolutely. Next slide. All right. So getting back to the tarot, of course, the supreme masculine and feminine depicted in the magician and the high priestess. We've already gone into a lot of the magician. The high priestess is, the feminine aspect of mastery and knowledge. What is most important is, over the years, of course, tarot has evolved. There are many different depictions and artistic renderings by, the artist's imagination of the concepts. But in the original tarot, the high priestess was holding a scroll that literally says Torah. The two pillars on the side of her with the B and J represent Boaz and Joachim. This goes into some of the legends of the Jews and the oral traditions. And I mean, it's so much that we just don't have time for. But, you can see a more recent, this one in the middle. Of course, she's holding a book. This seems like a more Catholic rendition. But again, we have to remember that the original tarot was created by many persecuted so-called Jews or Hebrews who had to hide in plain sight and place so much potent symbolism of Torah in these pictures to communicate through these encoded symbols. So, as other traditions and religions took hold of tarot, of course, they change the renderings according to their beliefs. So now we have a high priestess who's depicted holding what could be a Bible, So it changes, but we must remember the original high priestess was literally holding a Torah scroll. As you go to the next slide. Oh yeah, there go your girl again, Erykah Badu. Everybody loves her. All the brothers be so seduced by her, and we wonder why. Next slide. And this is Erykah Badu looking mighty witchy with her bestie, Marina Abramovic, who you brought up earlier. So we here see Erykah Badu and Jay-Z in very comfy, cozy looking positions with Marina Abramovic. And we should know, the old saying, guilty by association. If you did not believe in these things, why would you be so close to these people? We really have to pay attention to the company that people keep. There's no way that if you were righteous by any stretch of the means, or even for your people, pro-Black, Afrocentric, etc., that you would affiliate with these people. It's just no way. It's just no way. So whose side are they really on? All skin
Totally
folk
agree.
and kinfolk. So the next slide, ASAP Rocky and Usher, again with this same woman. But who is she? We may find out on the next slide. Yes. So her infamous spirit cooking rituals, she is popularly regarded as a so-called performance artist. But as I say, ain't that much art in the world. You know, that it goes beyond creativity and imagination when you depict things this depraved. And it absolutely has to be ritual. And in this case, it is absolutely diabolical. So, what many don't know, this picture here with the writing on the wall in blood, I have seen the video myself from which this picture was extracted. The video is literally a ritual of her writing on the wall with the blood of, some say it was a child, it was baby's blood. Some say it was pig's blood. What we may not be able to see as clearly, though, is in the bottom right corner of this picture is an effigy, a deity, an icon or idol. This deity, she proceeded to pour this blood over. As we know, anyone who, like myself, not bragging at all, but having participated in the rituals of the Yoruba Orisha religion, we know that animal sacrifice, what do? You pour the blood over these statues, over these figures, over these idols. So she just did a whole real life ritual that was caught on film with, again, whether it was truly children's blood or pig's blood. This is not performance art. This is not just some entertainment. We are often beset with literally sitting through and being complicit in and participating in live rituals right in front of our face, including the Super Bowl. And so, you know, she's writing this on the wall, as you see even in the headline of this article: menstrual blood, semen, and breast milk. These are ingredients that she uses in her spirit cooking rituals. And menstrual blood in particular, the oral traditions are very clear that there are actual curses of death upon women who misuse their menstrual blood, who do not honor the separation of Nida. And that's a whole nother story, going into those blood covenants that are literally made. And that's why the sanctity of marriage as a blood covenant is so important, which I hope we'll have time to get to later. But as you can also see in this headline, she's very closely affiliated with the Clintons, who are known for taking these trips to Haiti often to collect children. For what? You know, they have very publicly been exposed for trafficking and other things. You know, we can, certain names that YouTube probably won't even let us say, certain flight logs, all of these things we again have to keep in mind. These people are associated. There's literally emails between the Clintons and high level political figures where they're being invited to her parties, or they're even hosting her at their parties. And so they're all in bed together, quite literally. And again, we must ask ourselves, what is Jay-Z doing there? What is Erykah Badu doing there? Why everyone thinks that they're so pro-Black and such good role models for our people. So next slide, please. Um, Again, we have to ask ourselves, why would we even think
What?
this is?
I'm so sorry, but what in the urban apologetics vocab alone are we watching? What is this? Well, go
Hey,
ahead.
this is one of the spirit cooking parties. This is so much fun. Y'all don't think that looks fun? Apparently, Erykah Badu does,
Yikes.
and Jay-Z. Um, there's Lady Gaga right there. You know, these,
Mm.
supposedly this is a very hyper realistic cake of what looks to be the corpse of a woman submerged in blood, covered with blood. But again, we must ask ourselves whether it was really a cake or not. The fact that someone can be comfortable with this is disturbing enough, is depraved enough, is
Who
indicative
would want to?
of.
Who would even want to eat that? Like the sight of that should make the average human being sick to their stomach. How do you actually go and eat that?
Exactly, exactly. And I do have a video on my page where I kind of explain some of this, but just, we must understand these people are insane. It ain't no other way around it. These people are insane. And they become this way through, for lack of a better term, extreme hyperstimulation. When your dopamine is literally shot, when you cannot physically feel pleasure, because we have to think about the life of these elites, whether celebrities or political figures, high level figures. They have no privacy. They're under constant scrutiny. They are constantly hyperstimulated. They have access to unfathomable amounts of money, of privilege. They can eat whatever food they want. They can go wherever they want. They are going, we think even of the average artist on tour every single night. The physical demands of touring and dancing and singing, not only in the studio all day, not only in rehearsal all day, but then touring every night in different cities, different countries, flying through different flight zones, jet lag, all of these things, this is clearly doing something to the mind. When you have access to every type of drug in the world, when you have access to people who would deprave themselves and degrade themselves in the most unimaginable ways just for a few dollars, I mean, what does it really take? You have to have an increasingly diabolical sense of novelty to even be have some semblance of happiness or pleasure. So it's very dangerous to reach these heights of access, because where else is there to go? This is not normal. That's why Beyonce and Will Smith jumping out of airplanes for fun. Tom Cruise, 60, 70, 80 years old, driving motorcycles off of cliffs for fun. That type of adrenaline rush. You have to keep reaching these these heights or depths of depravity in order to just get a little bit of pleasure. So yeah, for them that's normal. For them that might even just be boring entertainment, everyday entertainment. And so to think that you have to reach those levels of novelty is very dangerous. So we can pause that there and go to the next slide.
Wow.
Again, these are real parties that your favorite celebrities and politicians are attending. Very high level
Pause for a
figures.
moment. Pause for a moment because I do want to say something, and this is actually serious. So we often hear celebrities in the hip hop world say, "Man, them Puff Daddy parties is crazy.
Mhm,
I walked in a Puff Daddy party and I seen some stuff. They make you sign NDAs before you even arrive. Them Diddy parties is crazy." I
mhm,
gotta tell you, looking at some of the stuff that you're showing right now makes me wonder.
mhm, mhm. Absolutely. I mean, Beyonce in that song, what was it, Top Off with Future? If you want to party with me, you got to sign a non-disclosure. And we know that
Mm,
was a reference to Tiffany Haddish. Tiffany Haddish got in a lot of trouble um, because she revealed about the infamous Beyonce bite gate or whatever they were calling it, when she got bitten. We
right,
don't know by who. Some
right.
said it was Sanaa Lathan. We don't know. But Tiffany Haddish wasn't even supposed to talk about that. So these types of things that get leaked out. Justin Bieber famously, this is recorded. This is public proof. This is not a conspiracy. Justin Bieber, before his interesting hiatus, you be wondering why people be falling off for years at a time and then come back in the industry. He was rattled. He was shaken. He was shattered. He said that at one of those parties, he saw a young boy, a child, being passed around, being assaulted, to put lightly.
Oh man.
And he said he left the party, and then he found out later the
Mm,
boy was murdered at that party. So things
mm.
like this are happening right in plain sight. This is not some Dionysus orgy from back in the ancient days of Greece. This is not some bacchanalia that the Romans practiced. These y'all folks, these your favorite celebrities at parties. Imagine being at a party and seeing people getting RAPE'd in one corner and other people over here fighting for their life in a literal battle
Listen,
royale. If you've seen Django,
It's
The movie
and you
Django.
see,
Those are real. This is what happens at these parties. The
yeah,
battle royale. Hmm. Go ahead.
this is crazy. You know, they wonder why no matter how many times I get the invitation, I don't go to the ISUPK cookout. All right, keep going.
You know what? You know what? You ain't gonna get me in trouble. You are not gonna get me in trouble. I'm just gonna look at my notes. Next slide, please.
Next slide. On that note,
Yeah. Yeah. Again, Debbie Harry. I think that's Debbie Harry, old 80s rock star. Having so much fun. We cutting open women on tables. But again, that's supposed to be a cake, y'all. And here we go with Marina Abramovic in the middle of all these body parts, whether they're real or not. Why? Why would that be classified as art? So this is, one diabolical example of a high priest in societies, and even Erykah Badu and Beyonce are. This is not conspiracy. In my time, even in the Orisha tradition, I have met high priests out of New York who was like, "Yeah, we saw Mark Anthony and J Lo come through there at the Bimbe the other day. We seen Erykah Badu. Like these, nobody's making this up." It's well known even in Atlanta. They practice African and European systems of high magic. These are Satan's high priestesses, for lack of a better word. So, because we'll be going back to the tarot card of the high priestess, this is one of them. Marina Abramovic, Erykah Badu, Beyonce. These are actual high priestesses in their tradition. Why y'all think they just out here entertaining people? They have real positions of prestige and honor behind the scenes in their societies. Next slide. So again, the evolution of different artistic renderings of the high priestess. We see the scroll, which again, in some of them, you can see that it does say Torah. So the wisdom of Torah is what empowers the high priestess. The pillars of Torah, the pillars, the principles of the teachings that are our foundation, that build the house of our faith, so to speak, is what strengthens us and empowers us. And again, it is Torah, because our God and his law is the only true source of any power. And unfortunately, there are those who draw from it to misuse it for their diabolical purposes. Also, what's interesting is in this one on the far right is she's holding the pomegranate, which is, there's a lot of symbolism there. I personally think of the myth of Persephone, which is a Greek goddess who descended into the underworld as she was violated or ravished by Hades. She was the daughter of Zeus, another so-called immaculate conception. And she was captured by Hades and taken into hell or the underworld and made queen there. And the pomegranate plays a very important role in that story as far as it being a fruit of enlightenment. And I have read in some sources that some have chosen to interpret the fruit of the tree of knowledge in the garden as a pomegranate. So
yes,
we can take that as we will.
absolutely.
So it's no accident that the high priestess would be holding the pomegranate as the fruit of knowledge. Next slide. Some more modern depictions of the high priestess card. As we see, there are wide variants of this image. Now we have almost a complete absence of the Torah scroll. But again, we know that its original origins are depicting the knowledge of Torah as the foundation of wisdom that empowers the high priestess. Next slide. Oh, you can, I meant to take that out. We won't have time to watch that video, but it's actually a very old video of Beyonce that shows her very blatant symbolism of the high priestess. And this was even back before she was anywhere as huge as she is now. We can skip this, but I will tell you guys on the replay, please pause and read that little blurb that was in the middle. You may find that very enlightening concerning the High Priestess card. You can go to the next slide. Oh, I won't have time to go into all this, but we know the tree of life of Kabbalah. Kabbalah has unfortunately been so demonized, and I know you, Moray, have spoken extensively in different lectures about the true origins of Kabbalah in Torah, and that Kabbalah is Torah. And, I won't rehash that because you've done such a brilliant job of elucidating that. The different letters of the Hebrew language are extensively used in the tarot cards and in ceremonial magic. Obviously, you are well versed in the gematria, the numerological symbolism of each letter, and they also are aware of this knowledge and use that for their diabolical purposes. To the next slide, please. Sadly, we won't get into all of this either. So you can just kind of go through these slides and we can probably revisit this another time, but there's such a wealth of knowledge that I would love to go into. Hold on, there's some more slides after that though that I wanted to focus more on.
Jump back on. All right.
So
let me know when you're.
Let me see. If
keep going forward, okay. Back.
You can go forward. Oh, I wish I could go into some of that. So much. You can go back to that previous slide. I'll try to go through some of that quickly. So we have here the Fool, the Hanged Man, and Judgment, which are three positions on the major arcana. The major arcana, again, is a series of images depicting different stages of the soul's journey through life. So we all are basically the fool in life, going through this journey to enlightenment. And each of the tarot cards depict the ways in which we are empowered, the ways we are deluded as well as disillusioned, the ways that we go through these paradigm shifts as our character is developed, again, through trials and tribulations, gains and losses, even the relationships in our lives, etc., and ultimately achieve the world of enlightenment. Here, the Fool represents ourselves as ambitious and exploratory, curious about the world, going into the world around us to discover ourselves. In going back to Carl Jung and the archetypal journey, every story is essentially, some protagonist who's going out on a mission. And oftentimes the mission they intend to go out to seek, it may be a quest. A lot of these are also related to the Holy Grail traditions, the Rosicrucians and the Templars. There's a whole body of knowledge related to how that's also aligned with the tarot and even some of Carl Jung's philosophies, but we don't have time for that. But these journeys to seek out something is really just conquering things within the self, these battles with ourselves, the demons within ourselves. And even the Wizard of Oz is a great depiction of this journey. You think you're going to find the wizard, but ultimately you find out that you had all of these things that you were seeking the wizard for. The Princess and the Frog is another great example of that from Disney. You think that you want for certain things in your life that you really already have. And then the idea of going on these journeys and sacrificing what you actually need for what you think you want, and all of this interplay between desire and want and covetousness and being satisfied with what Yah has created you to be. The hanged man, which is depicted in the middle, some have said that it was originally a depiction of Haman in the book of Esther, and many more have interpreted this card as to depict, in a sense, the mikvah of immersion. So this man who's hanging upside down, in the tarot, it's commonly interpreted as, it's kind of in the middle of the arcana. So it's in the middle of this journey where he's gathered all of these tools, he's gathered all of this empowerment, he's met with the magician, the high priestess, he's come into union in the Lover's card. You have to know the full deck of the tarot to understand this story. But here in the middle of the story is this interesting hiatus where he's suspended between worlds. And it's a crossroads moment where he has to die to himself and sacrifice his ego and his former beliefs in his former life to then be rebirthed into a new life. And so some would say, even as he's hanging upside down, hanging himself upside down, he is preparing to be dipped into the proverbial mikvah, the immersion, the baptism of the soul. And there's also connections to Odin in Norse mythology, the Norse god Odin, who is popularized in the, I think, the Avengers series or whatever Marvel series with Thor. But Odin also hung himself and sacrificed one of his eyes to gain higher knowledge. In the Yoruba tradition of Ifa, the Orisha Shango also hangs himself out of despair for, there's many different versions of the legends for whatever he did, but he hangs himself out of despair and self-condemnation as his own atonement, in a sense, to make up for his wrongs and be reborn as a more noble king, because he is the king archetype. He is the consummate king of kings in their tradition. And so to be reborn as a righteous king, he sacrifices himself. And some may say that these very intentionally mirror the lynching of Mashiach. Some may say crucifixion, but it is just as apropos to use the word lynching. And myself, I remember very vividly as a child, again, reading slave narratives and viewing the pictures. There used to be this website back in the 90s, ma'afa.org. It may still be up, but in a different form these days. But I remember it literally was nothing but pictures of lynchings, up close and personal. And as a child, I was very affected by that, seeing the brutality of lynchings. And what stood out most vividly was even seeing the children who would be pointing up at the bodies, these desecrated, mutilated bodies, and laughing. And, what's interesting, when we think even of the so-called crucifixion, we don't think of that type of brutality. And even when we hear of lynchings, our own ancestors here on American soil who were lynched, we often are so detached from the real visceral brutality of what they did, castrating our men, flaying their skin, ripping their skin off, and making purses and bags, and ornaments out of them. And we can only imagine, perhaps it was that brutal, if not more, for Mashiach. But that's another story. You can go to the next slide. Next slide. Here, because I wanted to talk about the womb and the nature and makeup of woman and femininity in understanding Torah, in a sense, as this womb in which we are shaped and formed and even alchemized. I don't really have much time to go into this as I'd like, but this is a depiction of the wheel of the cycles of the womb, the woman going through the different phases of her menstrual cycle, the different hormonal shifts, the follicular phase, the ovulatory phase, the luteal phase, and menstrual phase, which is the inner spring, summer, autumn, and winter. also corresponding to the different phases of the moon. Again, if it weren't for modern technology and all of these disruptions of our natural circadian rhythms, women would naturally synchronize with the different phases of the moon according to their menses and ovulation periods, and also syncretize with the earth as far as the times when we are fertile and even when the ground and the land itself rests. But we can go to the next slide. Let me see on my end what's coming up. Okay, so we can go a couple slides down so you can advance and I'll let you know. Okay, more about the menstrual cycle, the hormonal feedback loop. We don't have time to go into this. But these were presented as an attempt to delineate the differences between masculine and feminine, and even our hormonal feedback loop and the cycles of our hormonal response systems, respectively, as men and women, and why we are representative of and represented by the different elements, such as the rising and falling of the sun and its consistency, and why man is associated with that solar energy, that fire energy, as well as the dependability of the sun. We know that neither the sun nor the moon shall strike us by day or night, as the scripture says, but the consistency of the sun to be counted on to rise and fall at the same time every day is the consistency that man's masculine stability and security and safety brings. Whereas women, we are mutable, we are fluid, we shift, we shapeshift, our emotions change, we have mood swings. And so all of these different changes depict the fluidity of women versus this kind of solar, fiery energy of man continuously rising and falling. Again, even the male anatomy can speak to this. But we'll have to go into the science of this at a different time. Next slide. I will say there is a contrast between Earth's fixed nature as the stability of man. And we know that in constitution and countenance, the man is hardened. You know, men are more emotionally fortified than women are, which is not a negative thing. Women's vulnerability and emotional softness and mutability is also not a negative thing. This is why we complement each other, even as we contrast each other. So a man's emotional fortitude and even his resoluteness of determined action, whether in ambition or even the arousal to sexuality, is depicted in all of these things that man is symbolized by, even the sword and steel, the wands made of wood, and even the colloquial euphemisms for man's sexuality and virility. Even the phallic symbol of the gun itself. More importantly, when we think of the arm of Yah, we think of this extension of his power, this external direction of power. We think of the arm even as a scepter that a king uses to enact a judgment, or even the gavel of a judge in the courtroom. These themselves are symbols of power and authority, symbols of action and enforcement, even decrees that cannot be undone. For example, a killing that is enacted by a sword or even a gun cannot be reversed. The magic and energy that is directed outward by a wand cannot be stopped once released, just as even the birth that may come from ejaculation cannot be reversed once released. The decree of a king, the word of a king, the law of a king, once uttered and spoken, cannot be reversed or contradicted. The judgment of a judge, once his gavel hits the table, cannot be undone. Likewise, we know that our God in his masculine form is all of these, king and judge, and his word cannot return back to him void. The actions that are enforced by his arm extended, his mighty hand, are actions that cannot be reversed or undone. So I wanted to make that point as well. We can advance further if you're able to go to the next slide. Oh, yes. So now I want to talk a little bit about water and the fluidity of water. We can read this and pause this on the replay so we can advance through the next slide. You can advance to the next slide. You can advance to the next slide. So all of these quotations that I've selected are to depict the power of water, that even in its softness, in its impermanence, we know that it takes many forms and it has a very powerful, albeit subtle influence, just like the energy of women and femininity. Feminine power comes from the power of influence, whereas masculine power is through assertiveness and enforcement. So a lot of times we don't have the externalized power that men seem to have, but we have the power of influence through subtlety and even through our emotions. Men, in fact, are softened by the fluids, the waters of women, not only the sexual arousal fluids of women, not only the fluids even of birth, but studies have shown that even the tears of a woman physically affect a man's cognitive function, affect his mental activity, can change the chemistry of his brain just literally by witnessing a woman's tears. Or there was an experiment where men were blindfolded and they were put in front of vessels, one containing women's tears and one containing simple saline water. And just by being near the vessel of tears, they could literally scan their brains and see the different areas of the brain lighting up and the different responses that were enacted by the presence of a woman's tears. So the waters of a woman are very powerful, to say the least. We can go to the next slide. So I wanted to speak here about the symbolism of the woman, the womb, even the vulva, in a sense, as a form of the tabernacle, as a sanctuary. Women, there are many different euphemistic terms and symbolic terms for woman in literature and even in common speech. There are many definitions pertaining to woman as a whole, the woman's body, as well as the woman's regenerative organ, including words associated with the home, the sheath in which a sword is concealed, the chalice, the vessel, the Holy Grail, going into the Gnostic mysteries of Mary Magdalene as the Holy Grail, the chalice or the vessel that held literally what they call the blood of Christ or the blood of Yeshua, as some believe, that she actually was married to him and had a child. But that's a whole nother path we don't have time to go down. What I was hoping could be seen here in this image is even the shape of the tabernacle that may be reminiscent of the woman's vulva, the entrance to the holiest of holies, and even the veiling of the holiest of holies can be likened to the hymen of a woman. And we know that the penetration into these deeper depths of the temple or the tabernacle to access the holiest of holies, to access even, some may say, the Most High face to face in the fullness of his power. There was an old saying that heaven was between a Black woman's thighs. So we can see the penetration of man into the temple or the tabernacle can be likened to the penetration into the woman as a home, as a sanctuary, as a sacred space. Again, even the word yoni from the Hindu tradition denotes the woman and her womb, her vulva, her reproductive organs as a sacred space, a soft space, a space of surrender. You can go to the next slide. I would go into that, but I think we can pause that on the replay. We know that, again, just to reinforce what I was saying about the woman and femininity being likened in symbolism to the home, the house, a set apart place. We know that a man inhabits a home, occupies a home. He also inhabits and occupies a woman. He is home within a woman. He abides in woman. And thus, the Most High abides in us and makes us his sanctuary by his spirit, the penetration, the impartation of his Ruach. Next slide. So what's interesting is even with the tefillin, the rosh, or the head or the box of the tefillin that contains the Torah scrolls, is likened to a womb. And without, all the time that I would like to go into that, again, Torah can be seen as this womb, and the law contained within that shapes us, by which we are meant to be shaped, is the home that we return to through teshuvah. You can go to the next slide. The red tent tradition. I was going to go into the red tent as this controversial novelization of the story of Dinah, but I've written an article about that you all can read a different time. But in the work that I do as a womb healer and a doula, this phrase has become very popularized in the midwifery tradition and circles pertaining to the red tent as this place of separation, this set apart place where women would gather on the time of their nidah and come together to celebrate one another, to learn the mysteries of womanhood, and to enact different rites or rituals of passage, rites of passage or rituals pertaining to the womb and honoring the purification of the menses itself. Next slide. And here we go into the symbolism for masculinity, which we've talked about in the previous slides about alchemy. We know, again, man as a phallic symbol is associated with the knives. This is the work of an Afro-Cuban photographer, Raul Canizares, and a very powerful image that we could say so much about. But for now, I'll just say we can go to the next slide. Unfortunately, we know that man, there are many associations with very violent phallic imagery. And just to go back to the previous slide a bit, even the Black male sexuality in particular has been so demonized, as the Black man is often depicted as sexually ravenous, sexually undisciplined, this consummate, trying to avoid YouTube censorship, but this consummate rapist. And going back even further to our brief discussion about Birth of a Nation, the original Birth of a Nation film by D.W. Griffith was so controversial because it depicted, of course, these stereotypical images of Black men as lazy, as just very debauched, and of course, most powerfully, as rapists. And anyone who has also seen Rosewood or is familiar with the story of the Scottsboro Nine or the Central Park Five, we must be aware that the Black male sexuality in particularly has been so demonized. And it's interesting that over time, the sexuality was so demonized, but now we see the Black man so deliberately targeted to be effeminized through the media. Hence the wearing of dress controversy introduced by Dave Chappelle. Diana Ross. That was just a video clip. Anyway, we can see that another time. But we know the phallic imagery even of the staff of Moses or the staff of Aaron that was used to part the Red Sea. We can advance forward. So I brought out these images of the tabernacle, and particularly the pillar of fire or the presence of Yah descending to, I guess, again, to reinforce the point that Yah as a masculine symbol of a fiery pillar descends into the Mishkan, descends into the tabernacle or the temple as a man descends into or penetrates a woman as his house or sanctuary or sacred space. And there's also literature and traditions associated to the symbolism of the cherubim of the Ark of the Covenant, who some say are masculine and feminine in an intimate embrace. So we can also use our imaginations and take that as we will. So I do want to draw on, just to briefly speak on the cherubim and their embrace as the two angels guarding the Ark of the Covenant. We know that two become one in intimacy and marriage. And drawing from the work of Sabun Fusome, she says that in a marriage, there is a third spirit born of man and woman, of the two parties in a marriage, and it is the spirit of intimacy. And this third creation that is born of the union of two souls coming together as one, this new creation is the unity of Yah, as Yah Echad, the union of two becoming one, and that in itself being a divine alchemy in which man and woman come together in that complementary balance, which itself is even depicted in the so-called Star of David, as we see, to represent the union of Yah as Echad, as we are the unity of Yah. So you can go to the next slide. I won't have time to go into this about the firmament, the Rachamim. So we can go a couple slides ahead. You can advance ahead. You can go to the next slide. More about the firmament and the division of the waters. We don't have time to go into. You can advance ahead, please. That's an excerpt from Ari Kaplan's brilliant Waters of Life. Always love all of his works and their profundity. But I don't have time to expound upon that as I would like right now. Next slide. I put this here just to represent this contrast, even in the name of El Shaddai. We often think of the Most High, and rightfully so, in a very masculine sense. However, an interesting interpretation or definition of El Shaddai also refers or alludes to the breasted one, which indicates a nurturing aspect of him, even as he is our protector. And so El Shaddai, being the Almighty associated with mountains, we also forget that the voluptuousness of woman is also indicative of mountainous regions. And we don't have to stretch our imagination far to see how even the breasts can be likened to mountainous regions. And we see a nurturing aspect in the Most High, not only his strength and his power, but also even a maternal aspect of nurturing and gentleness as he cares for us. And you can go to the next slide. So I would like to pause to read this for a moment. So, Torah, living it through practice and adherence, is an alchemy that perfects and converts the soul. Torah is both a crucible and the womb, fire and water, in which we are purified and transformed, in which we both die and are reborn, fire in which the corruption and adulteration and the dross are burned away to leave behind what is precious, like the refinement of gold, and the water by which we are washed, immersed, as in mikvah, and with which we are filled with life itself, and within which we are shaped, as in the amniotic sac, suspended in liminality to emerge in his image. Torah is also a grave to our ego, as we are commanded to die to self, as we are implored, throughout the Brit Hadashah or New Testament. And simultaneously, it is the womb from which we are birthed continually anew over and over again. Next slide. So just an interesting etymological exploration of the word rechem or racham, related to, as you see, infinite love, compassion, and also the mother's womb. You can go to the next slide. Also, we think of El Malay Rachamim. So we know that he is merciful. He is a king of mercy. And we often speak and see written throughout scripture about his infinite mercies, his eternal mercy, his tender mercies. And that again brings us back to more of this nurturing, soft, maternal aspect of the Most High. As you go to the next slide. So I think this is one of the final slides. The womb is interpreted by sages as the rosh of the tefillin, the box in which, like Mesusa, are contained Torah scrolls, that we may observe the mitzvot, and they shall be tefillin between your eyes, and you shall write these teachings on the doorposts of your house and gates, in Devarim 6:8-9. Thus, inside the womb of tefillin is contained Torah, and inside the womb of mother is contained a living human being. Indeed, the embodied living Torah, as we, as Ha'adam, mankind, are, like Mashiach, meant to be the embodiment of the living word, through obedience to Torah, walking through life on earth as the testimony of the righteousness of Yah, through his Torah, which sanctified all of his creation, of which man is the most sublime, and within whom all creation is, just as literally and scientifically all of the minerals and elements of which the universe is comprised is contained in the body of man. Indeed, a true alchemical work of Yah's genius. The next slide. Here we are at the end. To be continued. Thank you for holding out, y'all. I know it was a lot I tried to squeeze in, and I really appreciate your indulgence and your patience through
Excellent. I
the
mean, you
presentation.
did a hell of a job, an amazing job.
I
Thank
tried.
you, Andrew Edwards. I mean, I'm sitting back here and I'm watching. Towards the tail end, I was like, "Is that an actual phallic?" All right, let me take my screen off because sometimes YouTube is very sensitive about certain images, and they could offer a strike to your channel
Mm.
if the image is too graphic, like actually showing the image of someone's personal part. So
Oh,
I had to just take off my screen just to let them know that we wasn't aware. We wasn't aware. But
oh,
to
I
no fault
see.
of yours, because again, we're doing it from a very pure space. But again, because on YouTube, you got to figure anybody's child can type in either on their device or their parents' device, and random videos come up, and whoop, now the parent want to know whose video is this, and YouTube is going to send that person a strike.
Uh-oh. Okay.
But excellent presentation, powerful presentation. And I want to say one more reason, but it's hard to say one when you provided several. But your presentation represents a plethora of reasons for why we need to hear more from the sisterhood. And that's why I had the poll from the very beginning of this live stream, right? Asking the community, do you think we need to hear from more of our sisterhood, the matriarchs in the community? To which the overwhelming response, 90% of the people said yes. I'm not sure what the other 10% was smoking this morning, what they were injecting, what urban apologists they hang out with, but in your right mind, you should know that in order to advance, it takes both the masculine and the feminine. The Creator said that He created man in His image, male and female, He created them. So the image of the Creator comprises both male and female. We are not advancing with masculine knowledge, masculine energy alone. It will also take the females. And this is why on this platform, we make sure to include the female contribution. It's not going to be just a bunch of men in here waving swords. We're going to have the matriarchs come through and show their worth and value as well. We took a good amount of time. It's 2 hours and 27 minutes in. I'm not going to hold you here much longer. Are you open to any questions if anybody was to join us live, or would you like to continue as you said you would come back? It's up to you.
I definitely hope to have space and opportunity to come back. I don't feel that I did it any justice because there is so much that could have been said. Like, still so many notes. Even as we discussed previously, the wood of the Ark of the Covenant and the wood of the tabernacle, the acacia wood and its properties. Even in my work as a womb worker, womb healer, and the African and Middle Eastern traditions of Kayan Mata and the women's arts of purifying the womb with the smoking, not that kind of smoking, but the smudging, the purification through fumigation of the womb through this steaming process where the woman sits atop burning acacia wood, as well as cloves and other cleansing and astringent ingredients to cleanse the womb. And again, when we think about the womb as this sacred place, this sanctuary in which a husband joins and becomes transfigured and transmuted, the influence of a woman to enact empathy in man, to soften a man, not in a negative way, to make him soft, as we, commonly think of as that a weakening influence, but in order to enact empathy, compassion. And that is the transfiguration that happens within a woman, penetrating a woman, and also in that penetration, depositing into her, imparting knowledge. And so we see the need for purity and purification, even in these processes passed down by the women of Africa and the Middle East. We think of that as just a simple cleansing ritual. The Kayan Mata, the purification of the womb, the yoni steaming that is done on as a bride is being prepared literally for her wedding night, the consummation of the marriage. But in a deeper way, thinking of how the temple itself was purified through the fumigation of these incenses and these certain resins and substances, and the creation of the ark and the temple itself of the acacia wood, and those kinds of connections. So, like, there's so much that I wanted to get into as well that unfortunately time did not permit for. Um, I also intended to go into some of the stories and beliefs and interpretations of the dynamic between Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, and even the pouring of the oil, the costly oil and its properties by which he was anointed.
I
So
think
there's just
I
so
think
much.
that should be the title for part two. I think that should be the title for part two, and I think you should come back and absolutely do that. Let's just figure out what date that you'd be ready and able to do that, and let's make that happen.
Absolutely.
Also, if you can, drop your Cash App link. There were a number of people that asked to help to support you for all of your hard work. So please do feel free to drop that link so people can see. Um, Also, make sure you let people know where they can find your books. You did release some new books. So make sure you put those links in the chat room. I'll throw it up on the Summer Jam screen and pin it there so everybody could see as well. Also, let people know how they could follow you on social media. You know, maybe someone wants to reach out to you behind the scenes with an opportunity. You know, these podcasts are long and they stretch. They stretch sometimes around the globe. Someone may want to have you on their podcast as well. You know, I don't try to monopolize my guests. I always push anyone that comes here to make sure that they put their info up so that people can reach them. So make sure that you overwhelm them if need be with your info so that people can reach out to you.
Okay.
And also, so y'all can stop DM me talking about, ew, Ak, what's that sister number? I don't got her number.
Oh no.
We connected on social media.
Yeah.
That's where we are connected. No, no, bro, because you know the brothers is reaching out for all the wrong reasons. She taking up, she spoken up. You don't even want to know the messages I'm already getting. All right.
No.
So luckily, I filter those messages so that they don't even come your way. Right. As you know, I haven't told you.
I
But you
appreciate
know,
that.
again, you're very welcome. Again, just be sure to leave as much of your info as possible. And I'm going to ask everybody that if you're reaching out to her, that is for set apart matters, right? It's for holy matters, and it's not to inquire if the sister is taken, right? Well, I don't think she'd be giving out her info for that.
No, not at all. Those are not the inquiries we are looking for.
Exactly. Exactly. So we're about to take a quick commercial as you get some of that ready. I'm gonna ask
Yeah.
everybody to throw up the video and share the live stream. Guys, we do have a very, very powerful series coming our way. Maury Michael Shalomo Baron from the movie Patterns of Evidence. He did say that he is willing to come back, but he threw a hefty tab in order to come back. And I ain't got it, as I mentioned to the community. So if you guys would like to see him come back, please make sure that you support this platform as much as you can. I'm gonna post the link and even take a screenshot, as it were, of how much he's asking for. I'll put that up on the Patreon for the Patreon members. I'll even put it up on YouTube for the YouTube members so that people know he wants north of $1,000 and just shy of $2,000. With that, he's promising to give us up to 7 different series. All right, up to 7 different series, very focused, very scientific in nature, based on archaeology, based on science, and based on history. And he has all of the credentials necessary to authenticate and validate it. But because of his skill set and because of his time, the price that he threw out is north of 1,000 and just south of 2,000. So I know I don't got it, but if the community would like to help, you can absolutely begin to donate. He's looking to do these lectures as early as this month, with the last lecture finishing in March. So your donations are definitely needed to make that possible. If not, I'll just let them know that we're not ready at this moment, and maybe we can try back in a couple more months. On that note, we'll be back taking a quick commercial. Peace.
All right, all right. It's your brother Zion Lex. Sign up for our online academy, which is Learn Torah Hebrew Academy at patreon.com/Learn Torah. There are several classes that we offer. We offer a Biblical Hebrew 101 class for beginners. We have a Biblical Hebrew 102 class for people who are a little bit more advanced. We also have a weekly Torah class. We also have our Patriarchs of the Covenant course, our Matriarchs of the Covenant course, and a bi-weekly rabbinical course. All of these courses can be found on Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Learn Torah. You guys were definitely in for it. It's a very invasive class. All of our classes are deeply invasive and very, very meticulous to the T when it comes to understanding the culture, the heritage, and the history of our ancient ancestors. So sign up for Biblical Hebrew at patreon.com/Learn Torah. I am your brother, Zion Lex.
All right. And just to point out some of the lectures that Maury Mikael said that he's willing to do, let me just read from them. He says, we could begin with a deep dive and a deep timeline into creation, including the historical Garden of Eden. He says, I can do a full justice from the scientific side. He said, we can also do a class on the historical nature of the flood in the Tower of Babel, proving it through science and history. He said, we would get into the hard science for this as well, for this event, as well as the creation impact. He says in a third session, we could do a deep dive into the patriarchal period, the outside evidence we have for the War of the 4 and 5 Kings, for which we have a strong mark left in archaeology of the Levant. He says we can also cram a lot or a little into the long ages of the pre-Abrahamic persons. He also says we could do a session on Joseph and what makes him, listen to this, the most historically attested biblical person in history, and perhaps getting into the pharaohs of the Israelite period in Egypt and the Egyptian bondage. He says we could also literally go into every point of the Torah that is demonstrably pre-Davidic, making it preposterous to claim the Torah to be of exilic or even First Temple origin. He says he will also include a summary coverage of what makes Moses valediction of Moses, a Deuteronomic text from probably the 18th century BCE, 600 years older than anything found in Qumran. There's a lot more that he wrote. I'm not going to get into all of those details, but again, Maury Mikael, Shlomo Baron from the movie Patterns of Evidence that I just interviewed just this week. He said he is willing to come back. He's willing to come back, and he's willing to give us up to 10 lectures. But the price he charges is just under $2,000, and I ain't got it. So I'm gonna definitely need the help of the community. So if you guys would like to have him back on and you would like to help support, you can send your support through Cash App at $Learn Torah or $Zion Lex. That will be used towards paying Maury Michael so that he can come back on this platform and deliver a very scientific and archaeological proof for many things that are occurring in the Bible as to its compilation. As I always say, people say, Zion, why you charge for classes? Why you charge for this? People who are doing the work are not playing about their time. There's a lot of effort and a lot of energy that goes into putting together this information. And if people are willing to sacrifice their energy and sacrifice their hard work, labor from sun up to sundown to get the information, then that sacrifice should be met by the people who want to see the information by monetarily contributing towards that person's effort. It's just that simple, right? We shouldn't even have to explain that. Only in the Black community, only in the Israelite community, we actually have to explain that. And to me, that's crazy. But if our community, again, would like to see him do that on this platform, he's absolutely willing to, but we're going to have to support that financially. So you can reach out to our Cash App at $Zion Lex, as you see on the screen, and we can help to make that possible. Princess Hadassah, it's on you to close this out.
I just would like to say I'm so thankful, as always, for this opportunity and for the generosity of you offering your platform and the generosity of the Mishpachah who give their time to watch and listen and be edified, not only by what Yah has given me to share, but all of the incredible dynamic content and interviews that you place and facilitate. This is truly a set apart, unprecedented level of scholarship and academic validity that you are offering the community that other platforms in the so-called conscious community or the Hebrew Israelite community simply do not offer. The quality and merit and integrity of the way you conduct yourself even in the interviews, and the quality of guests that you invite to your platform, again, is unprecedented. The education that comes forth, the edification and empowerment is unparalleled. And so it is always an honor that I humbly receive to be here and to be among so many great minds who come here hungry for something real, who are thirsting for something real, something pure, something that will truly transform the soul as we get truth and clarity about the word and our culture that, again, we do not readily find in other spaces. That's what I have to say.
All
So,
right. Well, I thank you for that. I absolutely thank you for that. Your words are honorable, commendable, and what you bring to the table, what you contribute to our community is literally invaluable. Invaluable. You contribute so much, and again, I personally can't wait for part two and the many more lectures that you can bring our way. Also, do remember to share in the chat room if you can. Oh, you did already. Your YouTube channel. Okay, I see it. So this is her Cash App, everyone. Make sure everybody can see that. If you'd like to donate, which I think everybody should, send her something. The sister came here. It's almost 3 hours now. We talking about the sisters can't teach. I got brothers that sometimes when I bring them up on this channel, they be messaging me on the side after an hour and be like, how much longer? She just went almost 3 hours. All right. Almost 3 hours. And I'm sure she could have done way more. All right. So we got to show our love. She has her Instagram up here. Guys, just go inside the chat. She has her website. She has a link to her books. She has a link tree, which will take you to all of the above mentioned. Make sure you find her. Make sure you support. All of her information is right there in the chat, everybody. On that note, Princess Hadassah, thank you so very much. Have a great Shabbat. I look forward to hearing from you soon, seeing you back in this space. I more than likely will see you this evening in Biblical Hebrew 102 here at Learn Torah Hebrew Academy. And if everybody else, see you tonight at 7 p.m. Do remember, we have an intermediate or advanced Biblical Hebrew class that starts at 7 p.m. tonight here at Learn Torah Hebrew Academy. If you are not signed up, make sure you go to patreon.com/learn Torah. All right. Peace to everyone and shalom, Princess Hadassah. Thank you very much for such a great and profound lecture.
Shalom, Nasi. Shalom, Moreh. Shalom,
Right.
Mishpachah. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
All right. Shabbat shalom. All right. And to everybody else, as I made mention, do remember that this coming Sunday, we have a brother that is very dear, very respected to me. His name is Chief Naphtali Ben Dan. He will be coming to present on the Nat Turner Rebellion. All right. That's Nat Turner's Rebellion. He'll be here Sunday at 4 p.m. here at Zion Lex TV. And I'm going to tell you right now, he was one of the greatest inspirations coming up for me in the Israelite community. I even will be honest enough to tell you, and he'll tell you too, me and him have clashed a bit in the past. Personalities. I was a young kid, full of myself with a lot of ego, and we have clashed. but because we both hold to the decorum of Torah, those clashes never got ugly. They never got distasteful, and we are still brothers and friends to this day. And I'd be remiss to not highlight both our highs and our lows, as well as just to be honest and open enough to say that I would look at this brother as a young person in the Israelite community at 15 years of age. I met him after already being in the Israelite community for just 1 year. And a year after being in the Israelite community, I went to a congregation on the other side of Brooklyn called Shema Israel, where he was. And he was already what we call today a chief man, which is a title that I didn't acquire until about 2014, 2015. But he had that title in the Israelite community since the 90s, early 90s. And he's been putting in a lot of work. And one thing about him is you're going to hear his passion, you're going to hear his wisdom, and you're going to hear his no joke style and approach to speaking truth to power about our people world over. Yes, he is pro Israel. Yes, he is for the culture of Torah, but he is a nationalist. And he will make you understand that when we get here. When he goes into these particular areas of history, I don't think too many can come close to what he does. So shout out to you, Chief Naftali Ben Dan. I personally look forward to that lecture this Sunday at 4 p.m. Everybody, we don't got no Super Bowl going on this Sunday. So hopefully everybody could lock in. This will be a lecture that your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your wife, all of your children, your co-workers, everybody can attend. It will be powerful. It will be prolific, but it will be respectful. And it's part of our Black History Month series. Salute to you, Chief Naftali Ben Dan. I know you're going to do a remarkable job on the story of Nat Turner and Nat Turner's rebellion. On that note, everyone, shalom. Have a great day. Have a great Shabbat. Learn Torah Hebrew Academy. See you guys tonight at 7 p.m. And we out.
All right. It's your brother Zion Lex. Sign up for our online academy, which is Learn Torah Hebrew Academy at patreon.com/Learn Torah. There are several classes that we offer. We offer a Biblical Hebrew 101 class for beginners. We have a Biblical Hebrew 102 class for people who are a little bit more advanced. We also have a weekly Torah class. We also have our Patriarchs of the Covenant course, our Matriarchs of the Covenant course, and a bi-weekly rabbinical course. All of these courses can be found on Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Learn Torah. You guys were definitely in for it. It's a very invasive class. All of our classes are deeply invasive and very, very meticulous to the T when it comes to understanding the culture, the heritage, and the history of our ancient ancestors. So sign up for Biblical Hebrew at patreon.com/Learn Torah. I am your brother, Zion Lex.